From everyone in Intac, I extend a warm welcome to all the members in the audience. Today is the second talk in our series of Terracotta in India exploration, and we will be looking at terracotta temples of Bengal, history, evolution and influences. And our speaker today is Shri Partha Ranjan Das. A very, very warm welcome to you, sir. He has traveled from Calcutta to deliver this talk. And he's a member of the Indian Heritage Cities Network Foundation, West Bengal Heritage Commission, and Center for Archeological Studies and Training, Eastern India. He is a principal consultant to West Bengal Housing Infrastructure Development Corporation Limited and advisor to National Institute of Advanced Studies in Architecture. He is the recipient of the Fulbright Scholarship in 1991. And when I was doing my research for the resource people on the subject, everybody I spoke to, he topped everybody's list. So, Sridas, very honored to have you. And now, without much ado, I invite you to take forward the event.
We all associate Bengal with terracotta because most of the temples in Bengal, most of them are made of terracotta. And there is also a lot of terracotta art which is produced by many of our villages like Bishnupur, Bishnupur being the most famous. But you know, terracotta has been practiced in Bengal, making and using of terracotta, utensils, decorative items, ornaments, for thousands of years. We are gradually finding, traces of townships in Bengal where terracotta was being made. So, the technology and the artistry was always there. Later on, they started using it as a cladding material in Bengal, but the technique of making bricks and terracotta was always there. There was one There is one advantage with Bengal. Am I audible? Is it okay? Okay. There is one advantage with Bengal as compared to many other states is that the number of rivers we have in South Bengal and the quality of silt, very high quality silt that we have in Bengal. The rivers produce a very fine quality of silt, which can be processed. I'll show a part of it, and can be very easily converted into very good quality terracotta. In ancient Bengal, there are buildings, there are townships where we find use of terracotta and brick right from the Maurya dynasty. The Wari Boteshwar, which is close to Dhaka now, dates back to 450 BC. There is something very close to Calcutta also. There is something called Chandraketugarh, which is mentioned in Manmohan Singh's daughter Upinder Singh's book. I'll come to that. But other than Chandraketugarh, there are many such townships. I'm not able to show everything. There is Karna Suvarna of King Shashanka, which is from 6th century AD. They have all used bricks and terracotta. The disadvantage with terracotta as compared to stone used in buildings and temples is that it deteriorates very easily. It's very soft. Stone is a more permanent kind of a material. But in old ancient times, even in Bihar, buildings and townships were made with wood and with terracotta, which gets destroyed very easily. So the number of ruins we have in India which are made of stone are a lot. But number of bricks, other than places like huge places like Nalanda, we don't have very fine examples of ancient and medieval terracotta. The existing few are in Bengal and Jharkhand and of course in Bangladesh. So I'm going to showcase some of them to you. I'm just going through what is still remaining. I mean, when we talk about Bengal, I'm talking about large Bengal, the old, undivided Bengal, and in the Pala and Sen dynasty, it extended into UP and part of Assam, Bangladesh, Jharkhand, Bihar, part of Orissa, and we still find temples where it is made of brick other than stone, even though stone was available there, and the ornamentation and the cladding, they were all done with terracotta. Nalanda is a very famous, in the old Nalanda University is a very famous university made of brick and terracotta, which is from 4th to 7th century. It is built over a long period of time, and most of the buildings were sponsored by the Pala dynasty. They actually believed in developing this university and a place of higher learning. So they supported the Buddhists, and they built many of the temples and the structures. Not all of them are structures. There are students' hostels, there are teaching classrooms. Many of them were built by the Palas. So after the Pala dynasty was gone, there was a slight decline, and also because the attack of Bakhtiyar Khilji, who came and destroyed Nalanda and a similar university which is very close to Bengal-Bihar border, called Vikramshila. The terracotta that I was talking about in a place called Chandraketugarh is only 35 kilometers from Calcutta, northeast of Calcutta. There used to be a river which is almost like a river now, called Vidyadhari. It flowed there, and we find reference of Chandraketugarh in many ancient books, starting from the historian during Alexander's time, Ptolemy. After Alexander died, Seleucus got this part of India as part of his fiefdom, and North Africa was given to Ptolemy. But Ptolemy was a historian. He always, started recording maps and documents and historical incidents. Ptolemy has mentioned in his book that there is a large kingdom which is at the southern part of Bengal, near the estuary where the river Ganges comes and meets the Bay of Bengal. And that's why we find, mentions of places like Tamralipto. Even though we find mention of Tamralipto in Huyen Tsang's book, in Huyen Tsang's book also we find mention of Chandraketugarh and another large township called Pundrabardhan, which we believe to be somewhere near, Dinajpur, which is partly in Bangladesh, partly in Bengal. So all these were townships which were made of brick structures and with very fine terracotta ornamentation. Now we have seen terracotta seals in many other ancient townships and archaeological findings in India, but what is important with Chandraketugarh is the workmanship. This is where we find that fingers of people are very nimble in this region, or they came from other places and they produce ornaments, not only ornaments and terracottas, which were of a very fine quality. Chandraketugarh was mentioned by Alexander Cunningham also, who was the first Director General of ASI. We only have a few ruins here and there, like it is shown, which is called Khona Mihir Dhipi. Mihir, we know, was the son of the famous astronomer Baraha Mihir, and Mihir got married to a lady whose actual name was Lilavati. He was from Pragjitishpur of Assam, and they got married and they built this house which was part of this large township. Alexander Cunningham believed that in Bengal there is a hidden township, hidden below ground, which will be approximately about 600 hectares. But this small excavation which has happened due to the interest shown by some professors of the archaeology department of Calcutta University, but not by ASI, even though it's a ASI protected monument. But I believe that there should be an excavation. I am trying my best from the West Bengal Heritage Commission to excavate some of these areas so that we can find artifacts. What is interesting about Chandraketugarh is, there's a clerk in West Bengal Heritage Commission who's an amateur photographer. Wherever and whenever we do a program, he accompanies us and he takes our photographs. He hails from this area. The village is called Barachapa, and he used to tell me that, whenever we dig somewhere, we find, terracotta artifacts. There is one person who passed away recently who had collected a lot of stuff from his own interest, and he's made a amateur museum in his own house. He has donated some to the West Bengal Tourism Department, and now we are building a museum. The government has given us an 1 acre land next to this, where we are going to put up all that we have found in Chandraketugarh. What is interesting about this Barachapa village is in a Bengal village, if you want to dig a pond, you have to pay money. You pay somebody 5,000-10,000, he digs a pond for you. In Chandraketugarh, if you decide to dig a pond, people will come to you and they will do it free. But they will say that whatever we find belongs to us. That is the deal. But the government unfortunately takes no interest, and this is how it is. Now, other than Chandraketugarh, there are other monasteries and buildings and ruins which are in Bengal and partly in Bangladesh also, where we find a lot of these terracotta reliefs and brick structures. But this is in Pala dynasty. But you'll find that the kind of fine workmanship that we come across in Chandraketugarh, that is somehow not there in the other stretches. This is a very large area called Bollal Dhipi. This is in Hooghly Nadia, very close to the ISKCON temple that some of us know about. And this is a very large area, about 13,000 square feet. And I believe if we can dig more, then we can find some more of these brick structures with terracotta reliefs. I am not able to show you something which we have recently found. In Bishnupur, there is a small town called Daton. Next to Daton, there is a Buddhist monastery. We have excavated only up to 13 feet, and then we are trying to restore and preserve whatever we have found, because if we keep digging, we may damage the structure. It is part of a Buddhist monastery, and below 13 feet below ground level, we have found a lot of terracotta sculptures, and we believe if we go further, then we will find some more. So it is, these Buddhist structures were all, connected to Tamrolipto, which is now Tamlup, and people who came to study at Nalanda, they used to come to Tamluk and Tamrolipto. The name Tamrolipto is because, a lot of copper was exported from here. But it had a huge Buddhist learning center, which is not there now. So all these things will add up to a complete history of the brick and terracotta structures in Bengal, which needs to be excavated and preserved right now. David McCutcheon had done an interesting study, wonderful study, and he had decided that this is the typology of Bengal terracotta temple, which agree to this. He had actually listed a few more which we don't agree to. So I am showing you the basic typology of Bengal terracotta temples, which are mainly three. Moncho I am not including because there is only one structure in Bishnupur, and it's not a temple, it's a public building. Which is interesting about this Moncho, I'll come to that later on, is it's a hall, it's a large hall made of brick and exquisite terracotta. The Rekha Deul, the first type, is just a structure with a cupola. It is clearly influenced by the Orissan type of architecture, and if you look at the top portion, it is absolutely like a replica of any of the major Orissan temple that we see, and it is there in all the dry regions of Bengal. Bankura, Birbhum, Purulia, part of Midnapur. Midnapur is actually shares the border with Orissa. So we believe that there was an influence in those days, and they were greatly influenced by the temples that they saw in Orissa. Orissa temples were made with stone because stone was available there, and in Bengal temples were with brick and terracotta, but structurally wonderful. Next is the Ratno style. Ratno is actually the chura or the cupola that you see on top. The main building is made of brick, full of terracotta cladding, but on top there are these terracottas. Now it can start with 1, 2, 5, going right up to 25. There are many temples in southern part of Bengal where the 25 cupolas are still there, but we need a great deal of fund to restore them. And in Bengal, unfortunately, we do not have a budget, we do not have fund. I'll end my lecture later on showing you what some of these temples have become like, and we really need to start now. The Chala style is a very interesting style. In Bengal, we conceived most of our gods and goddesses as part of the family. So many of our temples are a reflection of, how the Bengal hutments were constructed with thatched roof. So this is not there in any other region in India. In India, you see a temple has a distinct different form. In Bengal, many of the temples, especially in this south and the central south, they look like the hutments. If you go deep into the history of Durga Puja, how is the goddess Durga conceived in Bengal? Goddess Durga, the coming of goddess Durga after the harvest is like the coming home of your married daughter. The married daughter is coming home, therefore how do you welcome your daughter with all your grandchildren? That is how the goddess is worshipped in Bengal. And when the goddess goes away, all the rituals are like that, as if the daughter is going back home. So, the goddess was not like a very powerful goddess whom you worship so that she grants you something. It is like you're welcoming your daughter. You're welcoming your grandchildren, and that is how each of these, Kartik, Ganesh, Lakshmi, Saraswati are, they become part of the rituals. It's very interesting in Bengal. Moncho style, there is only one, which is Rash Moncho. Rash is actually a festival of worshipping a particular incarnation of Vishnu, and everybody in this Bishnupur in Bankura, they worshipped in one particular time in the year, and after their worshiping is over, they used to bring their idols, the deities, into this as a display. So this is basically a hall, nothing else but an open hall for public gathering. You don't see any other terracotta or brick structure which is made for public gathering, a very large scale public gathering. The base was about 72 feet by 72 feet, and the height was about 12.5. The ASI has made a very poor attempt at restoring it, but it has not been done properly. It's a very sad state of effort. It should be taken up seriously with proper expertise. When we talk about terracotta temples in West Bengal, everybody knows about Bishnupur, because Bishnupur is in the tentative World Heritage List of UNESCO. In Bishnupur, there is a large area which was started by the Mollo kings, and how the Mollo kings started, there is a long story. I am not going to narrate it here, but the temples were constructed from 16th, 17th and 18th century. Some of them are really in very poor state. The Bishnupur fort, actually the Bishnupur fort was constructed because the Marathas used to attack Bengal, because Bengal was very fertile and a lot of things were available here. They used to come in hordes and they used to attack southern Bengal, the kingdoms in southern Bengal, and loot them. So all these Zamindas, all the kings got together and they decided the Mollo kings in Bishnupur, they were the best suited to fight against the Marathas, and they allowed him to, the Maharaja of Bardwan gave them land and they constructed a fort. But the fort is in complete ruins. What remains in Bishnupur are only the temples. And the town planning authority is also not taking care, so unless they actually impose some measures, the fort will be gone in the next 10-15 years. In Bishnupur, the soil and the silt is not as good as we get in southern Bengal. So a lot of refinement went into making of the soil. At times, it took more than a month. I'm coming to that later on. But the details that you see, the ornamental cladding that you see all over the temple, it's exquisite. There are some attempts as restoration, that is why you see those white patches and the white lines, a very poor attempt at restoration using a very crude mixture of lime and white cement, but they should be taken off, otherwise they are damaging the terracotta ornamental work. These are some of the temples which are quite popular. There are a number of temples in Bishnupur. There are about 30-40 temples. I'm just going to show you some. This Radha Vinod is one of them, which is quite famous, and it is in good shape actually. It's not very old, so it's in good shape, fortunately. This is Madan Mohan temple, which is also quite large and very thick brickwork and covered with ornamental terracotta work. All these are in ek ratna, which means one single cupola. But there are other temples which have two of these Bengal chala types and completely covered with ornamental terracotta work. But again, in the name of restoration, what they are using is actually ruining the terracotta panels. So it's a very painstaking work to remove what has been put there. It may damage some of the terracotta panels, but there are other means to restore them. I'm coming to that later on, but I'll just show you some more temples which are my favorite. This is a place called Kalna, which is in Bardwan, and Bardwan and Hooghly, these two districts are share the common boundary. The Kalna is a very old settlements, and you find reference of Kalna in some of our old texts in 7th century also. And Kalna has now become like a conurbation. The urban conurbation actually carries on till another area which is called Guptipada. But Kalna, there are a large number of temples. Again, a very poor attempt at restoration. What is interesting about these Kalna temples is, the four corners, when they are joined together, they have put a long terracotta panel which actually juts out from the corner. This is a very unique feature of these Kalna temples, but fortunately they are intact. They are very intricate work, but they are still intact. Some damage has occurred and there are some attempts at restoring them. It should not be done like that, but they are still intact. Something can be done even now. These are some of the temples of Kalna. Guptipada is at one end of Kalna. This is incidentally in Hooghly district. This is from 18th century, 17th to 18th century. It's a group of temple. A Japanese architect has made a wonderful study on this group of temples, and these group of temples are quite well maintained. And one unique feature of one of these temples is painted ceramic tiles inside. There are some temples, I'll show you later on. There are very few temples in Bengal, but some of them have maintained and maintain these ceramic tiles quite well. And each tile is different. They are painted, specifically made, burnt for this temple, and they are very unique for these temples. There is a temple in Hooghly called Bansberia. It is called Hongsheshwari, and the shape is completely different. You don't find any shape in Bengal like this. This is an onion kind of a dome, and next to, on the left hand side of this Hongsheshwari temple, there is another old temple which is Ananta Vasudev, which is older than the other temple in Bansberia, which is again wonderful traditional temple which is full of these terracotta artifacts, and they tell you the history of many of the wars that had happened here, who built these temples, who was the king, and that was the tradition. But look at the way some attempts have been made at restoring. Instead of restoring, they are actually ruining the terracotta panels. In Bolpur, you find a lot of these temples. In fact, when Rabindranath Tagore's father came and bought land here, he bought the land from a zamindar family called Shurul. In Shurul Rajbari, there are a large number of terracotta temples. Very recently, those temples were restored by the ASI, and they did a good job. But last month, the Shurul family thought that the temples should be painted, and they painted these temples white. I don't know for what reason. Now to take off this paint will completely ruin the terracotta panels. How is terracotta made today? Terracotta as a building material has been always, was there, the tradition was there from the ancient times. So nowadays what the artists and craftspersons are doing is they take some clayey soil which is normally river sealed, and they mix it with brick dust, and if they can, they mix it with red oxide, which never used to be there earlier, and then they have to refine it, remove all the foreign particles, gravels, and if there is plastic or anything, everything is removed, and then the whole thing is soaked in water. If you soak it in water, there is a lot of salt content in southern Bengal, especially because they are river sealed. The salt actually gets dissolved in the water, and the water has to be removed continuously. So if you keep doing it, then after a month, what is left is, you have clear water and a refined silt. Then you take out the silt, again mix it with river silt, then you have some kind of a dough, and then that dough is mixed, and then it is covered with a thin cotton fabric before it is burned. It's put into inside a kiln and burned. This burning has to be about at a temperature of about 1200 degrees centigrade. In the older times, they could never reach 1200 degrees very easily. So now some of the old terracotta which we have found from the ancient sites, it has been established that they went up to 600 to 700 degrees only. So that is why many of the terracottas got broken easily, but later on they could achieve this 1200 degree temperature. From the 12th century, when Bakhtiyar Khilji came and destroyed Nalanda and Vikramshila, they came to Bengal, and then they established their own settlements there, right from Dhaka to Murshidabad to other areas of Bengal. And they were influenced by their building tradition, which was prevalent here. So most of the mosques that we see, most of the structures, starting from, taking over of Gaud, which used to belong to the Sen and the Pala dynasty, the buildings were made of, even the mosques were made of brick and terracotta. These are very fine terracotta work, but because these are Islamic structure, we don't see any birds or animals or human beings. These are only ornamental stuff. Some of them are in good condition in Malda, some of them are in very, very poor condition. All these are in Gaud, and the Motichur Mosque is in Birbhum district, and this was built in 16th century, more or less, because Birbhum is a dry district, it's in better condition. Some of the mosques are really in poor condition. Now when we talk about restoration of terracotta, we have to see that what are the Western techniques which are being used in Europe and other places. So terracotta has always been there in Europe. We have seen terracotta items in Greece and Rome, and terracotta tiles that we come across in Italy and Spain and everywhere else. But terracotta buildings were used only in southern part of Italy, and there are some of the buildings that I show you. The Schalaburg Castle was actually a converted fort, and the person who was in charge, Christoph von Losenstein, he decided that the fort, since they are not fighting anymore in the 16th century, it will be converted into a palace. And he employed a lot of artisans from Italy, and they added this ornamentation, the sculptures, etc. And it lasted for about 300-400 years. But in 1970s, they had to start restoring. This is another example, Newhall Street in Birmingham, where the entire building and cladding and some amount of ornamentation is in terracotta. The restoration of terracotta in Europe and other stone buildings are done using silicone. And the three top silicone manufacturers are Corning in US, DuPont in France, and Walker in Germany. Walker has a company called Walker Chemie, and they are helping enormously in restoration of the ornaments in restoring buildings. Many famous sculptures like Pieta in Rome, for instance, I'll show you the photographs, were destroyed by a mad person who came with a hammer and broke away Michelangelo's sculpture, but they could restore it with silicone because of these techniques available there. And silicone was used successfully in restoring terracotta in these areas, and we can use the same techniques here in India. But unless we do that, all our terracotta temples will be completely destroyed in no time. The two things can be done. There are some terracotta sculptures and ornamentations which have just a little bit of indentations or something. It can be painted over by a transparent coating of silicone, which can be done very easily. But there are some other terracotta sculptures which are completely destroyed. Now, if you take a cast, it's like a skin which can be formed with silicone, and with that cast you can recreate with silicone. You can recreate that terracotta, which is not strictly terracotta as it is made, but it is something which will look alike. So we have to go for this technique, otherwise we will not be able to recreate terracotta. When Pieta was broken, they actually completely destroyed the left hand of Virgin Mary and part of the nose, as you can see, and part of her head. So they created a cast using a silicone layer where some of the broken pieces were just stuck together, and they injected some reconstructive something like a resin, and they added the hand to the broken portion. So when it was restored, it was exactly like it used to be. So unless these techniques are not very popular in India, because in India we believe that the original elements should be used in restoration and conservation. But in the world, all over the world, they are now using new techniques, new materials, otherwise it will not be long lasting. So these techniques have to be used in our restoration of terracotta. A similar thing done in this famous sculpture, the Little Mermaid. Copies were also made. It can be done very easily because it's a very soft material. It's like a skin which comes up, and that is the mold, where you can, inside the mold, you can again cast with whatever material you want and then again recreate. If you don't do it, our temples will become like this. And in Bengal and in the entire region of Bengal, including Jharkhand, Bihar, Orissa, there are hundreds of such structures which are lying like that. The owners just do not have the wherewithal, they do not have the money to maintain or restore these. So unless NGOs and the government creates a fund and employs new technology, these temples will be completely demolished in no time at all. This is a large complex near Bardhaman, Rajgarh temple is our place, and we have studied it in the last 20 years. It is gradually deteriorating. This is another temple in Rajganj where we again have some fine examples of painted ceramics. Unless these are maintained on a regular basis, they will all go down. Examples from Bishnupur, look what has happened to these temples. So unless we use technology, unless we use bring in these new techniques, all these temples will gradually just vanish in the next 20 years. Thank you.
That was very informative, sir. Thank you. I wanted to ask, what is the possibility of including terracotta? Like you said, in India, we prefer to use original materials for restoration of those dilapidated terracotta walls.
I did get your question clear.
Like instead of silicon, which you were just talking about for restoration worldwide, what about using the traditional techniques with traditional craftspeople?
We can, but like I showed in my slides, that making pure terracotta is a very, very long affair. So you have to prepare the mud, mix it with gravel, then brick dust, and then take a cast and recreate that this thing. Say we want to replace a particular terracotta tile in a temple. Now there are thousands of tiles in a temple. In a good brick temple, there are thousands of tiles. So we have to, and each tiles are different. It's not prototype. So one advantage with silicon is that we can prepare a cast, and it comes off like a skin. So if you pour something, then it gives you almost an exact replica of what it used to be. So, but if you want to, in the traditional method, if you want to recreate thousands of these tiles, it will take an enormous amount of time and money and energy. I don't know if a third world country like ours can afford that.
But conservation, anyway, it's labor intensive, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, this is also labor intensive.
We also have to talk about sustainability. In conservation, like in new construction, we talk about sustainability. We have to talk about sustainability in conservation also. I mean, we in Bengal, at least we have seen that we restore a building, hand it over to the owner. What happens after that? Poor fellow is not able to maintain it. Do we go back and restore it again? It has happened to one building in Calcutta called the Prinsep Ghat. If you have seen the Hindi movie Parinita, one shot has been, one particular scene has been shot there where Saif is playing the piano. That is Prinsep Ghat, restored 3 times. Do we have money in our country to waste like that?
Okay, thanks.
So thank you for this wonderful talk. Is silicon very expensive to use?
No, not at all.
And what about the training in the use of silicon?
We need to train. We have our colleges which are training students in the traditional way of restoring, which is all right. But there are places where we have to think of a second alternative. If you read books which are like textbooks in restoration, they always talk about, thinking about the funds which are available and whatever the possible ways of restoring. There cannot be just a single way of restoring. So we have to think differently in the 21st century. Otherwise, all our buildings, if the owner feels that, in Bengal especially, we have seen that it's become like a stigma. If we declare a building as heritage, they are saying, no, don't declare my building, please. Why? Because they think it's a burden on them. They cannot bear the expense of maintaining because they have to recreate the old stuff. That should not be the case. We have to, identify certain buildings which are, let's say, grade 1 in the heritage list, where we go for faithful restoration. But there are thousands of others where we cannot go for faithful restoration. We have to accept that. I think the time has come.
Thank you. Thank you, Partha. That was stunning. May I request Member Secretary Dr. Shaden Misra to please give a token of our appreciation to our guest speaker. Thank you for sharing the stunning visuals and also cohesively sharing the context about each of them. Very, very heartbreaking to learn about the current condition of these beautiful temples, and we hope and pray that it's not too late and we will do something to conserve them, which is very effective. Just wanted to share a small nugget of information, heartbreaking information again that Partha had shared with me before before beginning his talk. He said, hundreds of these beautiful buildings were razed to ground by the British because they wanted to use the broken material as rubble for paving way and paving roads. Am I right? So, yes, that is heritage destroyed. Let's just hope whatever we are left with, we preserve it and we cherish it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming and supporting us. Thank you, the back-end team, Kushagra as usual, for helping with the tech part. May I invite everybody for a cup of tea outside.